Hi everyone, welcome back to You Are Here. I'm your host, Danny, and you're listening to You Are Here, which is a podcast all about growing up, being a little lost, but finding our way together. Today we are talking about idolatry, which is kind of crazy and like a very big topic. And, a few things did spark this thought in me. I'm in two worlds at all times. It's like the church world and also the internet. And in both of those places in my life, a lot of times, obviously, they kind of meet in the middle of like the Venn diagram of life. But specifically, recently, there has been like a literally analogous situation going on in both these places. And I just kind of want to touch on that. So let me explain. In the church world, there has just been loads of news and reports of things coming out about church leaders that people thought were different or better or more moral or etc. And so that's been interesting to grapple with, and also comes to just like a lot of pain and a lot of grief, a lot of like conflicting emotions, a lot of tension, and just all those things. On the other side, on the internet, there is a similar situation going on with Cody Ko and Tana, if you guys care, if anyone cares out there, okay? And basically Cody Ko's a really popular YouTuber, kind of has like this golden boy persona, and some pretty like upsetting and gross reports came out about him about having an inappropriate relationship with this other YouTuber, Tana, when she was a minor. So things like that come out, and obviously like immediately, and sorry if you didn't know about the Cody Ko and Tana thing, and I'm just breaking it to you right now. Sorry. But I think something really interesting happens like when both these things. I think number one, obviously they're different to a degree, but it's so interesting, not to mention Venn diagrams again. What are we, 3 minutes in? No, less than that. 30 seconds in? 2 minutes in, and I'm mentioning Venn diagrams again. But to bring it up again, I feel like though the severity, I think, of what's going on in both these worlds and these spheres are different, and the consequences should be different, and things like that, I do think what's so interesting is the sentiment around these two figures and these people are actually like very similar. Like if there was a Venn diagram, and in the middle it was all like the similar, all the emotions are the same. Like I'm reading, comments about it on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, and they're all just like, oh, I'm so sad. Like I thought I could trust this person. I thought I knew him. I thought he was better than this. I thought whatever. And like I'm just like disappointed. I'm losing like a comfort YouTuber. I'm losing all these things. And then on the other side, it's like I'm disappointed that this person that I thought could lead me, could same kind of vibes, like could bring me comfort as well, could that I could trust, that I like thought I knew, thought that I was doing the right thing by believing the best about them, whatever. All of those things like really do get put up and like held to question. But anyways, though these two scenarios seem so polar opposite, or like in completely different worlds, I think it's so fascinating that they really have elicited very similar or exactly the same emotions from the viewers, from the people. And I just kind of wanted to touch on that because I think really what this whole situation reminded me of is the golden calf story in the Bible, and how people, no matter what we do, no matter how advanced we think we are, no matter how evolved, how much information we have, ultimately we love an idol. Like we love to put our gold and put it in something else other than God and or ourselves, etc. So anyways, this is what this podcast is about today, and this is why I want to talk about it, and that was kind of like all my thoughts leading up to it. But since I already did mention it, let me talk about the golden calf story. So if you're not a Christian and you're listening to this podcast, I invite you to stay. I feel like, hopefully you'll hear something that you haven't heard before, or you'll hear something you have heard before, but I'm going to try and explain it in maybe a way that is more like about it. And I guess, I don't know. I also tend to have like a very anthropological approach to life. I think people in general are the same, right? Like we like to what I just said earlier, like we think we're so different or evolved, but really history, like actual history, proves otherwise. We've always behaved this way, and it looks a little bit different from generation to generation, or era to era, but ultimately, like our humanity has maybe not inherent, but is broken, and we have vices, and we have things, and we have tendencies or habits that are more attractive to us than following God, or then becoming a better person, right? And so, okay, the golden calf story. If you grew up in church, you probably are familiar with it. If you didn't, let me tell you. Golden calf story is found in Exodus 32. And to give you some context, Exodus 32 is coming from the whole book of Exodus about Moses and his life, and what got him to the Red Sea story. That's basically that. So 32 picks up at the end of the Red Sea. That already happened. They already saw God do all that amazing stuff. Now they're going around the wilderness and trying to figure out how to be free people, because they're no longer slaves. So at the very beginning, God said to Moses that God says it multiple times in the Bible, but he told Moses, and then furthermore, he said it in Genesis as well. I will be your God, you will be my people. That is the thesis statement of the whole Bible, of what God wants to do, of his plan for the earth. I will be your God, you will be my people. Okay. And so in that process, God is partnering with human beings, trying to find someone that will listen to him, trying to find someone that will obey him and trust him and walk with him, really, and partner with him on the earth. So we get to Exodus. He finds Moses. God wants to partner with Moses and his family. Okay, they finally get out of slavery, and then we have 32, which is the golden calf story, where Moses is going up to Mount Sinai. He's the one talking to God. He's the one getting the plans. He's the one going back and forth, going up and down this mountain, getting the 10 commandments. He's the one doing all of this. And there's a lot of things that go into that, but I won't go into that. I'm sure there's questions you have of, like, why was it only Moses? Why couldn't everybody go up there? Why couldn't everybody talk to God, et cetera, et cetera? And those are great questions. I don't have time to answer those today, but maybe we'll get into it later. So he's talking to God as Moses is up there. The guy that he left in charge with everyone starts getting some flack from the people. The people are like, what the heck? We had a better life in Egypt. They would give us food at least. We didn't have to be hot out here. It was just a better vibe being slaves than it is trusting this random man who is saying that he's talking to God and keeps on going back up and down the mountain, whatever. And so they're just really fed up with their whole situation. And I do think, not to get preachy, but I do think that brings up a very interesting additional point to my main one, that I think sometimes our notion of what freedom is, or what freedom looks like, is not actually what it is. And I think a lot of times freedom is a longer, harder, tougher, more painful process than it is to just be the same. And I do think freedom is for everyone. I don't think everyone is for freedom, even though people say you can be free, whatever. I think when the rubber meets the road, that's really what shows people, what shows you what you're made of, And that was just for free. Not to get into it. Okay, back to golden calf. So all these people, they're mad. Then the guy that Moses left in charge is like, hey, great idea. You guys want something you can see, basically, because their whole thing was they had a pharaoh, they had a king, they had someone that they could represent righteousness, holiness, godliness. I don't know. And so he was like, great idea. Everybody gather your gold. We'll melt it down and we'll make a golden calf that we can worship, sacrifice to, pray to, whatever. So another historical important or like tidbit that is important is that they were previously slaves to Egypt, which Egypt is known, they're known to have like multiple gods for everything. And so I think they were, and these were people that these a lot of these people didn't know freedom. Like they didn't know a life apart from being slaves. So all that they had seen was like so many gods and all of this idol worship. So they were just asking for something familiar to what they were coming from. And so the guy in charge says, like, let's just do this. So they all do that. They all melt it down. Moses is still on the mountain. He comes back down. He's like, what the heck are y'all doing? God's not going to like this. Sure enough, God doesn't like it. So then you have this whole story about people basically reverting back to idolatry. And I do think that it is very interesting because I feel like that's really just a trait of humanity. I mean, that's in the Bible, but I'm like in history, I mean, obviously Egyptians because of a context of the story, but even just historically, like they loved idols. They also they made animals idols. They treated their pharaohs as idols. They did a lot of things that was idolatry. And I think even now, like in a modern context, thinking about like something silly, but like American Idol, like we also have a similar version of idol worship. And I think now with like influencers and all those different things, they're another version of an idol. And I think even more so now, I feel like in the story, there's like a very cut and dry example of like everybody gathering their gold jewelry and melting it down and like building an idol. But I think even now, like think about how much money you've given away to like an influencer who has an Amazon link. Do you know what I mean? Like it's the same thing, like in a different way, but like we are trying to attain something that we see on our phones or online. And the only way to do that is by giving them our gold, by giving them our time, by giving them our money, by giving them our aspirations even. Like we root for people. And I think that's very interesting that we have our own version of that as well. And maybe it's not all the time as like severe as idol worship or like sacrificing things or yourself. But to give your money, to give your time is still a sacrifice. So just like giving that to you, submitting that to you. And so, yeah, that's basically the story of the golden calf. And another observation that I think is also very interesting is at the very beginning of the Bible, God says that he makes man in the image of him, of them, the Trinity, of us. Let us make man in our image, right? And so God makes us in our image. And I think what's such another interesting point about this story is that you have people that created this image of something that they were actually meant to subdue, because right after in Genesis, God says, let's make man in our image. He also then gives Adam a responsibility to subdue the earth, to be fruitful and multiply. He gives him a job. He gives him things to do, to walk with him. He partners with him in a very literal sense. And I think it's so like devastatingly poetic that all of these people agreed to actually sacrifice their collective image of God and to place it into something that they were actually meant to have like power over. And then they worshiped that thing. And I think a lot of times like our life works that way as well. I think we tend to like my influencer point earlier, but even in just like other things, I think we love a graven image. We love something that we can see, and we love something that we can project upon, that we can control, that we can manipulate into our own easy way of life, of moving, of working, whatever. And I think so much of it is just like a projection of what's like all the hard things we don't want to do. It's easier for us to project it onto someone else, to do it, to achieve it, to make it happen. Right. And I mean, I'm like don't think I'm better than you just because I'm making this observation. All I'm doing is making this observation. I'm not saying that I'm great at not doing that. And I think that is such a difficult reality for me to swallow, and that I love projecting like my hopes and dreams onto other people because I hope they can do it because I know I can't. And I think that is just something to understand, to like grapple with as well, that our life is really it's a very hard thing to navigate for me, especially because I think there is always like especially if you grow up in church or you're in church, like there's an overarching understanding that like God's in control of your life, and or like God is over your life, God has a plan for your life, whatever you grew up with hearing. And I think what actually ends up happening a lot of times is like people end up in this path of like least resistance, number one, because it's like, well, if it's up to God, it's like, it's up to God. But also people kind of end up, people being me, people end up being like very passive about the active role that they have in their own life. And I just think that's very strange. Erwin McManus, who's a pastor in California, he's awesome and like a speaker and author, etc. He says God empowers you to change your own life. And I just think that quote has changed my life, because at the end of the day, when you understand who God is, when you understand his goal, his future, his purpose for humanity, for creating us, for what he wants to do in the earth, all those things, when you understand those things, why would you not be empowered to do stuff, to make more money, to build businesses, to try things, to put yourself out there, to do all those things? Like, why would you not be empowered to do that if you have a good understanding of that? And again, like, that is a way of being submitted to God and following him. But I just think people get so caught up on the fact that that will like, God's not telling me to do this, or I haven't gotten a word about it yet, or whatever. Like, they just get so stuck in all these strange, honestly, I think it's like pseudo spirituality. Like, I think the most spiritual people that I've ever met in my life are actually the ones that trust God, that do things that scare them, and that they trust that also if they feel like God has put a gift, or God's put a word, or God's put a book, or God's put something in their heart to do, and they feel it so strongly in them, they're just going to try, and they're going to do it. And they don't need all these strange, like, I don't know, supernatural confirmation. I don't know. I think that's like a very interesting part of this whole journey as well, of like achieving, of hearing, of doing, of obeying. Dang, I didn't realize I was gonna go there, but I did. So yeah. I think the golden calf story and idolatry in general is something that we all deal with, and it's like a through line through humanity. I think because of specifically, I did want to touch on like the church, because I know that is like such a tough thing, and I feel like everyone to some degree has, if you've been involved in church, like you have some degree of pain or of hurt that you've experienced. And I think a lot of that hurt and that pain does come from this kind of culture of, we love an American Idol, we love a American Dream, we love something that is this elusive concept, or something, again, back to the projections, like it's something that we can project upon. And I think what's happened because of the scale of like a mega church or anything like that is we have siloed these, oftentimes actually exclusively men. We have siloed men into becoming these figures and these idols, and essentially like a Moses figure. And by the way, the way that the story of Moses ends is actually very devastating. Moses himself doesn't get to see the promised land. And I think that is just because of the sins that he committed along this journey as well, of failing to trust God and failing to lead the people of God in a way that was righteous. And I just think that is so another cautionary tale about this. I think once again humanity is proving the pattern of like what we do, that is that we oftentimes will be so that we'll think we're doing the right thing, we will get it wrong, and we'll follow God, and we don't get the promised land, because ultimately it's not about the things that we do, but it's also the attitude of our heart. And that is something that nobody knows but you and God, literally. The Bible says man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And I think because of the internet, because of social media, it's very easy to make man look good, man in general. It's very easy to make man look good and to market them to oblivion and to make them this righteous, holy person that is like so talented and so gifted and has all and is anointed to do the work of the Lord, whatever. And you have all of these people rallying around them saying the same thing, and telling them that as well. Which like at what point do people just start believing it about themselves, even if they maybe know it's not true? And we have all of these things coming at them, and then what ends up happening is exactly that. They end up being Moses. Like they end up running things and doing it to the best of their ability, following God, believing God, trusting God, all of that, and they still don't get the promised land because nobody told them to like watch their heart. At the end of the day, nobody told them that this whole thing of like becoming a Christian, of freedom, of all of those things, like it is not an easy thing to do. And like I'm not saying I'm better or anything like that. I'm just saying I'm just observing, okay? Anthropological approach to this topic. But yeah, I really just thought this was a very interesting conversation, a very interesting like parallel happening to me, to us. I don't know. If you're online and you're in the church, like it's a very interesting things happening at the same time. So I really like understanding that and observing that. But I'd love to hear if you guys have any observations in the comments or in the reviews, whatever you thought about what I'm thinking. This really was kind of just like all of my word vomit of scripture, of what I feel like God's talking to me, of what I feel like is going on in society and culture today. I think people are people. And no matter what area or sphere of culture, of life that they may be in, I think no matter what, they're always going to repeat the same patterns. We're going to feel the same things. And yeah, I really hope that this conversation and really just the podcast helps us understand that like we're all not that different, and that brokenness that's in each of us is in each of us, and we all need, I think, to feel like less apart, less different, I suppose, than I feel like what like culture, or I don't know, even like church sometimes, or the internet says that we are. Because I think who we are, what we want to see, the things that we want to do, really just come down to each of us, like the stories that we tell ourselves. And I actually, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I remembered that point. I was listening to a really, really great podcast. And it was actually between Laura and Peter Toggs, Laura is the daughter of Brian Houston, who pastored Hillsong Church, which obviously, if you, again, in the church world, you know about Hillsong, you know about the years they've been having. Well, they recently started building their own church in Australia, and they were kind of talking about it on the podcast. But they were asked what they felt about just all the years that they've been going through this with Hillsong, leaving the church, etc. And her husband Peter said he's learned and understands that there's two sides to every story, that there's a lot of stories, and at the end of the day, the most important story is the one that you tell yourself. And that is really ultimately like what I believe, I think sums up the whole idolatry conversation so well. I think the reason why people get these titles of like golden boy or man of God even is because not necessarily that's what God is saying, or that's what, they're saying about themselves for the YouTube side, but it's because that's the story that you've decided to tell yourself about this person. That's the story that multiple hundreds, thousands, millions of people have decided to tell about this person. And, I don't ever want to be cynical, and I don't think I'm a cynical person. I think I am very skeptical of most things, honestly, but I don't think I'm cynical, and I don't say that to create cynicism in you or in well-intentioned people who are trying to give a compliment or whatever. But I am saying that in order for like a consensus to be made about someone or about something, it's because you're all sharing this narrative about someone that you choose to perpetuate about them, whether you know them or whether you a lot of times you don't know this person, which is what's astounding to me, is that people are willing to put their reputations on the line for someone that they think they could trust, which I think is a part of the betrayal aspect of both of the Cody Co thing and of every church leader that has disappointed us. It's like you thought you could vouch for them. You thought they were someone different than they turned out to be. And that hurts. And this whole thing really, though, at the end of the day, like not saying that we're responsible for whatever horrific actions they have done, but you are responsible for the story you tell yourself about people. And that can be negative and that can be positive. And you're also responsible, while we're at it, for the narrative that you tell yourself, right? About you and who you are. But I think a lot of times it's so easy to just make gods of men because of the story that you're telling to yourself. And so I just think that's very important. And another, like, such an important thing to just be aware of, be observant of, even within yourself, even within myself. And, I am exactly like what you see is what you get. Like I am, everything I say, I mean, if I do reserve the right to change my mind and to be better and to be corrected if I need to be, or to have more thoughts thrown my way. I love being challenged. I love like discussing tough things. And so, yeah, maybe you'd completely disagree with me, and I would love to hear why you disagree with me. Or maybe you totally agree with me and you're like, finally someone is talking about this. I've been waiting for someone from the church to talk about Cody Co and Tana. But maybe you just stumbled upon it and you need to hear someone just say you're sorry that you had to deal with your church hurt, that you had to deal with someone, with a church leader betraying your trust or hurting you, or anything like that. Like, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry that, like, this is a pattern of humanity to make idols of people that do not deserve it. There's only one God for a reason. Like, God is who he is because we can't be that. We cannot be God. And that also is, like, really sums up Christianity. I think, yeah. Anyways, I was going to put like a salvation thing, but really, if you've never been saved before, I think the best way, or you've been curious about Christianity, whatever, I think the best way to sum it up is, like, are you tired of being God? Because that is a huge burden. And I think this whole golden calf, this whole pastors, YouTubers, whatever, these people have played God. These people have tried to be God. These people have tried to run by themselves, to run things, to run organizations, to make loads of money. Whatever it is, they've done all these things by themselves, and ultimately their character has not been able to sustain that. And that is a story, that's a cautionary tale of life. It's just disappointment, failure, turnover of of people that we should have been able to trust, that shouldn't have hurt us, that should have made better choices, and they just don't. And like, not to, I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but I am just trying to be honest and realistic, is that the only way that this stops is actually not by more people deciding like, oh, well, I'm just going to be better. Because obviously all of these men thought they could also be better. And this is what's it turned into, right? History is men trying to be better and then killing each other over it. And again, men generally, not like men. And so I would just say, if you're tired of being God, the answer to fix this whole thing is actually just submit to God. And that is like really crazy, but I think that really is the best way to sum it up. If you're tired of playing God, if you're tired of being God, submit to him. And rather than putting your gold in yourself, which will just leave you like burnt out, tired, upset, angry, cynical, jaded, you get to put your gold into a faithful God. Maybe you have 100 million questions. That's so fair. Me too. But you get to do it in great community. You get to do it with me. And like the podcast says, we are a little lost, but we're all finding our way together. And I think that is what is the beautiful thing about Christianity. And we get to trust and submit into a God greater than us, better than us, who's seen it all. And guess what? He also thinks we're the same. Which there's a lot of comfort in that, I find. Yeah. So anyways, I hope you really enjoyed this podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode, these thoughts that I'm having about culture, about YouTube and how they all come together. Don't forget that the most important story you tell yourself. Don't forget that the most important story is the one that you tell yourself, and that to take your gold and put it in him. A pastor at the church I'm at said that, and I loved that. Take your gold and put it in God. And yeah, there we go. Okay, so last notes. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you enjoyed this, if you liked this conversation, if you liked hearing me talk, seeing my expression, seeing my face, and leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, positive, negative questions you have. If I don't know, if I made any sense or if I made no sense at all to you, please follow the podcast on Instagram at youarehere.pod. You can also, I think on Apple Podcasts, you follow a podcast. So follow us on Apple Podcasts, leave us 5 stars, leave us a review. Those really, really help the algorithm, and we need some algorithm help. Please and thank you. If you have any questions or like for links or anything like that, they'll all be in the description on YouTube. And you should just come over to YouTube because we did reorient the space for our audio only listeners. So it's just a different vibe in here. Also, I did get a tattoo on Saturday, which is very cute. It's a little chilly. And yeah, that's all I have to say now. Well, thanks so much for listening, guys. Oh, okay. Follow us on what? Follow us on TikTok. I did forget that. So please follow us on TikTok. Okay. That was the last one for real. Bye, guys. Thanks for listening. Mwah.